Feminism. It's meant to be a positive word, and it has so much negative stigma attached to it.
Yes, it does. Do you know why, however?
For a more complete story of the beaver, why not contact the Canadian Wildlife Service in Ottawa?
As a lot of people believe that feminists are man-haters.
You know, I don't know where you'd ever get an idea like that. It's not like feminists go out and say, I am a feminist and I hate men.
It's all about benefits for women.
Unfortunately, feminism, by design, is only for the benefits of women. And that's because, at its core, feminism believes that men hold privilege over women in almost every single scenario. Or at the very least, they hold privilege in the important things. So it's quite understandable that feminists don't really see their female privilege. And if you can't see your own privilege, you cannot address it. If you're in doubt of this, here's a couple advantages. Women control the household funds, even if they're not the primary breadwinners. In today's society, women control sexual encounters more than men. And women's lives are valued more than those of men.
When in fact, actually, a true feminist fights for both genders. It's all about equality. And yes, of course, the word feminist has female in it.
In general, feminists don't fight for men. What they end up doing is they end up trying to remove negatives that men have, because sometime down the road, women may actually have to pay those penalties. For example, you don't hear many feminists argue that women should be part of the draft, because if this ever came to pass, it would cost the lives of many, many women. However, fighting for the draft is fighting for gender equality, which feminists claim to do. So it puts them in a bit of a bind. They want to protect women, but they also want to promote gender equality. So what do? Well, it's really quite simple. What they do is they hold the position that there shouldn't be wars. That way, they never have to address the draft because it's a non-issue. And what's better is because they're ignoring the draft, they don't have to admit that there's a way that men are disadvantaged compared to women.
The fact is, the reason why the word came about was because there was a lot of inequality for the female gender in the sexist and patriarchal society that was, and maybe people may still think is.
Yes, there was inequality. The question is, do you know why there was inequality?
The reason why it's called a feminist is obviously because it was fighting for female rights at the time and not men. But obviously, as I've mentioned, that it was obviously women fighting for female rights or women's rights.
So women have all the same rights that men do in North America and many other first world nations, so maybe we should change the name. Let's call it humanism. But most feminists don't want to have that name change. They want to remain feminists. Why? I would put it to you that feminism carries baggage with it, a baggage of a long history. And with that comes core concepts that are not easily tossed aside. Ideas, if you will, that are based in history and may or may not be true today.
There are so many male feminists. It's not just females fighting for women's and men's rights, it's actually men fighting for the rights as well. And obviously now it's supporting both genders through suffering and inequality.
Yep, there's men in feminism, and guess what? There's women in the MRA groups as well.
And a lot of people believe feminism is solely about women, when in fact actually, yeah, inequalities that women suffer, but actually there are a lot of inequalities that men suffer. And I'm just going to go through actually a lot of things that feminists fight for.
That's fantastic. I know feminists fight for things, don't get me wrong. But when they fight for men, they're not actually fighting for men, as I said previously. They're actually fighting for the removal of the obligation to be treated equally to men.
Men are told that their problems and their matters are not problems, that they don't matter.
Which group, pray tell, could you guess that would say men's issues don't matter?
And also that men, I mean, there are so many people that believe that if a man cries or shows any kind of weakness or kind of emotion, they're not a man. They're not a true man. When in fact, actually, we all know that we all have different emotions. And if a man shows his emotion, he's probably more of a man than someone that hides it. Because it's so good to be open with your emotions. And it's not just for females to cry, it's actually for men to cry as well. And there's so many negative connotations to a man crying because he's not a true man.
No, that's not true. So what we need to understand is the difference between showing emotion and being sensitive. They're two different things. Men show their emotion all the time. Have you seen a happy man or an angry man? Those are emotions. Sensitivity is a taboo because men in our society and most societies throughout history are the ones that have to take the hardest jobs. Jobs that break you down physically and mentally, like going off to die in a war, doing construction work in the middle of the wintertime, or even just going down into a mine where you might die from suffocation. Being sensitive is in opposition to those roles that men have done for thousands upon thousands of years.
Another true fact, men never, will hardly ever...
What never? No, never. What never? Hardly ever. He's hardly ever sick at sea.
...win child custody. Why is that? And that's an inequality in itself. That's ridiculous. I mean, men can just be as good parents as females.
And can you guess what group of people puts out information trying to scuttle this issue away by saying, oh yeah, men and women have exactly the same custody rights? Can you guess?
Men are also abused and no one seems to care, and they suffer abuse in relationships as well. So why isn't that such a big thing? But this is what I'm saying, feminists are fighting for these as well.
Then why do we see constant opposition to things like men's shelters by feminists?
Men are raped. So obviously rape in prison, men are raped not just only in prison but also out in the outside world. But everyone seems to find that really funny.
Again, guess what group finds it really, really funny?
Whereas if it's in the reverse, it was a woman being raped, no one would find that really funny. So that's just a bit ridiculous. Men are also sexualised and objectified in the media. Men's suicide rates are higher than women, so surely that kind of shows you that men are suffering. So really, feminists do fight for both genders and...
I'm sorry, but they really don't. Can you name me one feminist that's opened a men's shelter? Go ahead and Google it, I'll wait.
Not only, obviously, all these men are going through this kind of inequality, there are so many things that women suffer as well. And a big topic at the moment is obviously equal pay for men and women. Why should a man be paid more than a woman for doing the exact same job? And obviously people come back with the argument that no, well, maternity leave, so actually it has to liaise with the kind of amount of money that they're being paid. No, because not only I think men should be given paternity leave.
The concept that women earn less than men for the same amount of work is a feminist myth that it's just nonsense. And it's really easy to disprove, because imagine that you're a business owner. Wages are a huge expenditure for your company. Now, you have women that will do the exact same work as men that only take 77 cents on the dollar. Why would you not just fire all your men and hire women exclusively?
And they should be there at the child's birth. They should be there through the whole process and engaging in, you know, the child growing up in the very first few months that it's born. So that's not really a counter-argument to that.
I'm sorry, but what you believe about child rearing is not a counter-argument to anything. But more to the point, men aren't avoiding paternity leave. Many men would love to be able to get away from their jobs. It's just that the women have decided that they are the ones that are going to stay home with the child.
We also use women's nude bodies to sell products. And yet when a woman actually willingly shows off her body, she's shamed for it. We're fine with seeing women and females' nude bodies as products and objects, but as soon as that we see them as a person, that's wrong.
So when a woman shows off her body, she's shamed for it. Who's shaming this woman? Could it possibly be other women?
Also, a recent case that I saw about on Facebook is...
Well, then you have to know it's true.
Is that a woman, a female teacher, was found out to be an underwear model. Well, was an underwear model and also had like that kind of job on the side. And she was sacked. She was fired for that.
You really have to check your sources with these sorts of things. Oftentimes people who are fired will sit back and say, oh, I was fired because I was an underwear model, not because of my gross incompetence.
And yet, recently, like a week after that, a man was classed as the world's sexiest teacher and was actually signed by Armani and is now an Armani underwear model, but was never sacked or anything. That's cool for a man to do it, but for a woman, no, that's bad.
Using anecdotes for evidence for your argument is a really, really easy trap to fall into, and you seem like a very bright lady, and I think you should read this and really think about it. And if I may, one last little bit of advice. It's often really, really easy when we're young to think that we are more knowledgeable than we are. We get our first taste of freedom, we get our first responsibilities, and it's intoxicating. As someone who's quite a bit older, let me give you one piece of advice. You need to be skeptical of all ideas that you come across, but especially the ones that you're going to agree with, lest you find yourself falling for a dogma that has little to no basis in reality. Thanks again for watching. If you liked the video, please share, comment, or subscribe. Have a good one.